Hi everyone, this video is going to be about a new feature in Broadware used to create curved lines and fills. So we're going to go ahead and create some curved lines and fills. So first of all, I'm just going to choose a basic object, a circle, turn it to a fill, and then we're going to go ahead and add some shape curves to it. So to control curves and fills, we have a box basically that's put around the fill that's composed of four lines or curves, and they shape the way the fill gets filled. So we have a new feature under the tablet bar called fill shape curves, and we have four different preset types, and then we can add our own. So first let's start with just the preset type, which is all lines. You'll notice that automatically added to the fill is a child object that's called a shape curve. And the shape curve in this case is just lines, and it has anchor points put at the corners. It's important the anchor points basically define which lines are for what feature. So in this case we have a top line which affects the points going down the fill, and then we have a side lines that affect actually the lines going through the fill, and then a bottom line which affects the points going through the fill. So let me explain that a little better by actually going ahead and changing this to a curved fill. You notice that the fill will be now up and down. You can't see that quite yet, but let's zoom in a little bit so you can see the lines now go up and down as they're defined by the sides. We're going to change the spacing to something larger so it's easier to see what I'm talking about. So see how the lines actually go up and down? When we originally imported the fill with the curve, with just the normal fill, it was 45 degrees. It's not, now it switched to 0, but anyway. Um, in the normal mode, when you just do a fill, it ends up making it 45 degrees. So you'll see that it's 45 degrees going this way. So that's just the default. That's not like hard pressed that it has to be that. But anyway, so when we change this to curve fills, you'll notice that now the lines aren't no longer working on this angle anymore. They're actually working on these two side curves. The two side curves determine how the lines go through the fill. You notice when I stretch these out, they get stretched out too. Now, so just imagine from this line to this line, a bunch of lines drawn across the width of this to actually have to create these lines. So if I go ahead and make this go even further over here, you'll notice that they become shaped like that. Now what's neat about this is that when you actually look at it in a rendering, you can see it kind of has this starburst shape, which kind of is a neat effect just on its own. The top bottom lines affect how these points go down, and they're not really that interesting at this point because there's nothing to really see that is unique about these. But if I were to choose a 2mm lines fill pattern, you'll get to see what they actually do. So now we have the lines, the points perfectly parallel. Now if I move this point up here, you'll notice that the lines will turn. And they're straight here, and they're turned down here because these points are following these two lines. So the good thing to remember is the lines on this side and that side control the actual stitched parallel lines, and then these two lines up here control the points along the line. So if I do this sort of thing, you can see I can create some neat effects with the fill. And you know, it's probably not easy to see in blue, so we'll change this to a different color and we'll stitch it out. And you can see that we not only have lines going this way, but we also have lines going this way. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is, so these are just straight lines, but then we have the ability to add two straight lines on the top and curves on the sides, two curves on the top and straight lines on the sides, or all curves. So let's start with this fill shape curve, curves left and right lines up and bottom. Now when you do that, you notice that now we have a curve on either side, and we have straight lines still at the top. And so I'm going to go ahead and just change these curves so you can see what ends up happening with the lines. So we're just going to do a similar shape on both sides just so that you can see what this does. All right, so you can see how these end up being S-shaped, or the reverse shape. They're not S-shaped, they're reverse of S, but these lines essentially shape the curves in the fill. So they just basically follow these lines. And so when you look at it in 3D, you can see that they're wavy. Now, just like before, if I raise this up, these lines end up getting raised up. I mean, the points, the top and bottom control the points. And you can see now it looks like that. Now, what's really neat is if instead of using these, you use all four curves as curves. So then basically these ends still end up being the same as the previous example. Oh, for example, also, if you just change one side, you know, basically it goes from straight to curved. So you can see that it goes from straight to curved on the end. So that's kind of neat. Or you could just do any combination of shapes you want and get different effects. It's really up to you how you want to deal with that. That one kind of does sort of a circular thing, and then it does a squiggly thing here. Let's change the spacing to something bigger so it's really more pronounced what it's doing. So you can see that it's a curved shape here, and then it kind of morphs into a S shape. Now the lines are all still parallel now, so let's go ahead and change the tops. So if you change the top, a similar thing happens where now these points get changed or morphed into different things. So you can see how this would look. Now it's hard to see that morphing, so we're going to change this back to something like 2, and we'll show you what happens with that. So now you can see that basically we not only shaped it up and down, we shaped it left and right, and you get a really neat effect. The next item I'd like to discuss is your own shape curves. So there's no reason why you need to use the presets, although for certain things that's all you really need to do. We're going to remove the shape curve that exists by using the remove shape curve. And it's similar to removing holes and stuff. You select the parent graphic and then you select the child and it will be removed. And now it's here as another object. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I don't need it anymore for what I'm going to show you next. So I'm going to have some fun and just do some wavy lines. I can't guarantee what this is going to look like. It'll probably be really crazy looking, but we'll see. So now I have some wavy lines going around. And for your own shape curve, you're going to have to do a few things. You're going to have to close the graphic, and you're going to have to Oops, didn't close it quite right. Close the graphic. And then you're going to have to set anchor points at the corners, because basically you need to define 4 curves. So you got the 2 curves that affect where the stitches go along the lines, the top and bottom, and then you have the left and right curves that define how the shape of the lines are. Now I've been saying top and bottom and left and right all along just for the ease of describing this, but this can be a rotated object, and so it wouldn't necessarily be left and right, but I'll show you that after I change these. So I'm going to put anchors on the points that I think will be my corners. So I'm just going to roughly choose these corners here. Now that I have that all selected, I can go ahead and use this feature called Add Fill Shape Curve. And basically what this gives you the power to do is you basically can make any shape curve you want for your fill. It's updating. It's probably doing some crazy stuff right now. Okay, so basically you can see the result of that is pretty neat. It's kind of makes you dizzy, of course, but so what it's doing, oh gosh, it is pretty dizzy looking, isn't it? It essentially is taking these curves to move the points around and taking these curves to actually make the curves themselves shape certain ways. So let's go back to a bigger spacing so you can see how the actual curves are shaped. So you can see the curves actually kind of morph between these 2 different shapes between the A's on this side, and then they morph over to this side. And the same thing for the points along the curve. Now, I chose a stitch pattern that basically was just lines by choosing the 2mm lines fill pattern. But if I chose some other pattern, it still would morph it, but it would morph it in different ways because these lines, these points are already kind of on an angle for the zigzag, let's say. Let's go to circles and have some fun with those. So we'll choose the circles, and then we'll change the spacing so that we get bigger circles. You can see over here how it's changing into something very strange and interesting. But you can have a lot of fun with this. You just kind of change it until you got what you're looking for, and you just have fun with it. There's nothing cast in stone in embroidery wear. It's all about you being the creative person, and by playing around with stuff, you can do some really neat things. Now, one thing that I have to caution you about is that when these fill shape curves are done, some of the section ordering might need to be done manually because the automatic algorithm might just not do it very well. So if we go in here and open it up and see what it did, hopefully it did a good job. It's taking a while, isn't it? Okay. You can see basically because it's curved fills, you have these sections here that are really kind of odd because they're no longer like a normal looking section. They actually have some shape to them because the boundaries of the sections are set by the curves themselves. And sometimes you get some really strange little tiny sections that you don't want. So for example, we have some sections here that are named 1 and 3 that probably are pretty small. So I'm turning off the sections. Oh wait, I got to turn it to manual. I turn off the sections so you can see them. Oops, what did I just do? Okay, I turned them all off. But let's see. You got section 1, that seems pretty big. But then you have like a section 3. Oh, that's big too. Hold on, I'm trying to find the tiny sections. Maybe there aren't any. Well, okay, section 2 here. See how tiny that is? There's nothing really there, hardly. It's just a few points. And, you know, is it worth putting that section in the design? Probably not. So you're probably wondering, well, how the heck do I change that? Well, If we go back to auto and we go back to this other screen here, you'll find that there's a feature for curve fills that's called curve section limit. And basically what that does, you can see there's a section 2 here. What that does is it actually determines what's the smallest distance between points or between the start and end of a section before it considers it valid. So if we change this to a larger number, that section should go away. I'm hoping. Not sure yet, but we'll see. Yes. So you can see that just because the automatic start paths one of them used to go down here. Now that section's gone. So when you go back into the section ordering dialog, you'll have fewer sections because you limited it to 20. That's basically 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters is a typical stitch length. So anything under 2 millimeters is probably fine. You can see that it doesn't really change this that much, but you can see that section is now gone. So that's important to know when you're doing these curved sections because it's so non-standard, and you can see that the lines go in some really strange ways, but it can be a lot of fun too. So just play around with it and see. Right now we only have really 5 valid sections, and it makes totally sense because these are big groups here. And you probably have to section order this yourself because when we stitch it out, let's see if it looks good. Sometimes you'll see stitches on top of each other because it just didn't section order it properly. But you can, okay, so this looks fairly good, although you can see there's stitches on top of the other stitches, which means it just didn't do it right. You didn't bury your stitches right. So you have to do it all manually.